All right, thank you so much. Welcome to another episode of the Love, Hope, Lyme podcast. My name is Fred Diamond. Of course, I'm the author of Love, Hope, Lyme, what family members, partners, and friends who love a chronic Lyme survivor need to know. I want to remind people that even though we're going to be talking about Lyme disease and tick-borne disease, this show is not a replacement for medical care. If you're struggling with Lyme disease and co-infections, please seek proper medical care. If you're watching this on YouTube, thank you so much. Give us a thumbs up, leave a question, give a comment. We like to see those. Sometimes Gregg and Melinda, we've had dozens of comments, so please leave them. We'll get to them. And if you're listening, I should say, on Apple Podcasts, please give us a 5-star review. We would greatly appreciate that. Want to remind people again that my book, Love, Hope, Lyme, it's been available for free. The PDF version has been available from day one. And Melinda and Gregg, I've given out close to 5,000 PDFs of the book. If you want to get the physical copy, go up to Amazon. It's available there. If you want signed copies, reach out to me via social media, and I'd be happy to get them to you as well. So we have Melinda Bernstein and Gregg Kirk on the show today. And if you recognize the names, they have been on the Love, Hope, Lyme podcast before, and I wanted to bring them both on. We're recording today's show in the fall of 2025, but the show is going to be released, if you're listening now, in early 2026. And Gregg and Melinda have been two of my more spiritual guests. And Rabbi, we did a show specifically with you on a lot of the spiritual nature of chronic illness, and we published that show about 1.5 years ago. Gregg, you were one of my first guests. Of course, you're the author of The Gratitude Curve. You're also the author of your new book, Your Love Will Make the Difference, a memoir of spiritual adventures through healing. And I also want to make a comment that Gregg appeared on my sales podcast that I do, my Sales Game Changers podcast, and he was featured in the book Love, Hope, Lyme, with family members, partners, and friends who love a chronic Lyme survivor, speaking about the 6 stages of healing. And we also did some reference to being mission driven, and you with the Ticked Off Foundation. All right, so it's great to have you both here. We're going to get a little deeper into some of the spiritual aspects of chronic illness and how you can become the best self and healing, etc. To get our guests caught up, or listeners caught up to speed, why don't you both give us a little bit of an introduction? Rabbi Melinda Bernstein, why don't you go first? Just give us a little bit of an intro to yourself, and then Gregg.
Well, thank you for having me back on your show again to discuss my favorite topic, spirituality. So I am a spiritual rabbi. I do not abide by the dogma practices that religion offers most folks, but I do translate what that means into spirituality. I've been a rabbi for, wow, I count the years, 16 years. And I've been loving it. I've been loving the opportunities I've had to serve humanity, and it's been great. I'm in South Florida. I'm a mother of 2. I have 1 son-in-law and 4 grandkids, and I'm very happy when I'm playing with all of them.
Very good. 16 years, Mazel Tov, as our friends like to say. It's great to see you here. And yeah, it was quite interesting when you reached out to me, that a rabbi was reaching out to me about chronic illness, because it brought a couple of my worlds together. So I would encourage people to go back on YouTube and Apple Podcasts and find the show that I did with Rabbi Melinda, and you'll see the links in the show notes. Gregg, get us caught up and tell us a little bit about the new book.
Oh, about my book. So yeah, the new book. So the first book was written in 2018, and that pretty much chronicled my life previous to Lyme disease, and then through the gory struggles of Lyme disease, and then this spiritual awakening that occurred in the middle of it that was completely unexpected. I was just trying to get better physically, and then suddenly this other thing happened also. And it wasn't linear at all, and it changed my life. And where the title came from was I actually became grateful for the experience, not for the pain or the suffering, but for the gift of experience. And it was, because then it helped me help others through that experience. So I published that book, and then within a month, I started having these other experiences, like the death of a family member, and I opened a healing practice and started doing energy healing. I started having some, amazing experiences with patients. They were having amazing experiences. You could call it miraculous in a lot of ways. A lot of deep knowledge that came through these sessions, and so that's where the second book came from. It's no designs on creating a sequel, but that's more or less what it is. But it is a book of spiritual adventures. But there are 4 chapters on how I healed from Lyme, how I remained in remission, and then how I went from remission to optimal healing. So there's some steps and tips that can be practically applied in someone's life, not just from Lyme disease. So.
Yeah, it's fascinating. When I discovered or decided to understand more about how chronic Lyme disease affected someone in my life, I did not expect the spiritual aspect to come up. And I've had numerous conversations, to touch on what you just said, with people who have looked at their chronic illness from a spiritual nature. Are they grateful? Some people have said that they've been grateful to have gone through chronic Lyme because it's brought them to more of who they were meant to be. And matter of fact, when I had you on the Sales Game Changers podcast, we talked about how you got over the hump, if you will, into a place where you could give back. And of course, you created the TikTok Foundation, and you did a lot of work with helping people find solutions. So it's a fascinating topic, and I'm looking forward to getting deep into this. All right, so Melinda, uh, the spiritual initiation, and it's kind of interesting as we're crafting these questions. I want to make sure the questions come across well to help us engage in a smart conversation. The spiritual initiation that chronic disease becomes not just a physical struggle, but a doorway into awakening. Give us some of your thoughts on that. Then, Gregg, I want to hear your thoughts.
Well, imagine I was in Northern California healing a prior life and having a relatively good time in my life when I got bit by a tick. So talk about awakening. It's like you got the good and the bad and the ugly all in one. And if we're chasing the good and avoiding the bad, guess what? The ugly is going to come out and get us. So we have to sort of juggle all the balls together. And fortunately, I think I've had a lot of practice at that. Just the nature of karma, it's just that's the way my life is unfolding. And as long as you can learn to play the game, then you can manage to stay in it.
Tell us a little more about that. So again, I mentioned you're a rabbi. Tell us, do you remember when it first occurred to you, when you first started putting some of this together, and how that became more illuminating to you?
Well, it first came illuminating to me when I left Northern California and I came home to support my father, who was ailing and on his way out into the next life. And I was not forced to, but I had a shift change of behavior, leaving Northern California, coming to Southern Florida, eating bagels and cream cheese while supporting my family in their needs to get dad comfortable. Bagels and cream cheese are not very good for Lyme, and my knee swelled up to the point where I could barely bend it. That was the sign. It was a culmination of grief of the family that I was born into, celebration of the fact that I knew that I had evolved past the family that I was born into and had addressed a tremendous amount of trauma to be able to sit with these people and do the deed of caregiving. That those were the good and the bad. And then, of course, the ugly was getting well, which took me 10 years before I knew what it was.
Yeah, that's interesting. Gregg, what are some of your thoughts? Again, you just wrote the book. You and I have had a couple conversations about this. We've gone deep into it on occasion. So I'm interested in where you are.
Yeah, well, your personal traumas and struggles, like Melinda said, can bring some of these things out, bring the disease up to the surface. So for me, it was the birth of my daughter and buying and selling a house in the same month she was born. Troubles at work, and then all of a sudden I had these Lyme symptoms. And it's interesting, after I published the first book, my mother-in-law passed. So I went through that grieving experience, or, supporting somebody who's on their way home. And then I was, Fred, you asked how I was doing before we came on, and my mother passed on Tuesday. So I just went through that again. It's just how ironic these cycles happen. Within a month of publishing the first book, my mother-in-law passed. Within a month of publishing the second book, my mother passes. And so that can bring, symptoms up. And it's a crucible of emotions that it's occurring that can bring illness up. Luckily, this time it didn't, but back then it did. And it just made me wonder, it just derails your life in a way that feels disruptive at the time. When you look back later, you're like, you look at it and say, oh, I was not meant to stay there. So it's a skin shedding experience. In my book, I call it a forest fire. Forest fire. Fire seems bad when it's burning down your house, but if it's burning down a forest, part of it, it's creating new room for new growth. There's certain pine cones that don't activate until they are exposed to extreme heat. It's the same thing with a person. If you stay stagnant in your life for long, you'll get ill. And so the illness it's new information. It's information that something is changing or needs to change for you. And like I say to most patients I help, if Lyme disease is a life-changing illness, then maybe there's something in your life that needs to change. So it points to things in your life that need to change for you to grow.
Absolutely. Well, first off, our condolences on the passing of your mother, which we didn't know about until 30 seconds ago. So sorry for your loss, and may your mother rest in peace. And I look forward to talking to you about that afterwards. I'm kind of curious. So one of the challenges with chronic Lyme disease, and we all know this, and a lot of people listening know this, is it's very difficult to treat medically. And especially when it gets into the chronic stage, well, particularly when it gets into the chronic stage. And Gregg, we've had numerous conversations, you and I, about the realms and the extent people will go to try to find a medical cure. And it's actually horrible, the levels of how medicine can help once it gets into the chronic stage. That being said, Rabbi Melinda, how faith, presence, and surrender shape healing when medicine can't fix what's unfolding? Give us some insights into that.
It's comforting for me anyways to know that I'm not in charge, like I can't control everything. And so I have to surrender some of my awareness to the mystery of what could be unfolding. And that helps me get quiet. When I get quiet, I'm able to dissolve some of the concerns that happen in the mind because the communities that I'm involved with don't have answers or are giving me answers that don't sound very sound, or just leave you hanging like that's their opinion and that's all there is to it. A lot of these things don't sit well with me. So I think just being aware that there's other things that are happening in the energetic field helps me be held.
So, Gregg, what are some of your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So I think sometimes it's important to find out what doesn't work. And it's important to find out that certain doctors and certain remedies will not work for you. Because and then to react to them in a way where you're not the victim and you don't just say, oh, well, I guess there's no other way to heal. And that's where you start to travel into the realms of faith. Exactly what Melinda said. Like maybe the good stuff is coming to you and you just don't have the perspective to understand it. What's given me a lot of to help me hold my faith is the saying that life isn't happening to you, it's happening for you. Every aspect of it. Because every time I've looked back at a disaster that's occurred in my life, I've realized, wow, that there was actually something more amazing on the other side of that difficulty than what I was experiencing before. So I've gotten to the point now, and I've talked to other people about this, where if something starts to happen and it feels like a disaster, I kind of already start looking forward to the good stuff that's coming. And that's a walk of faith, that Melinda's talking about. It's the same thing with symptoms, where, eventually you'll find the right treatment. It's a custom road. It's a custom situation. The same treatments don't always work for the same people. So, yeah, just holding and staying out of a mindset of victimhood, anger, the fight or flight stuff. Everybody is finding out and knows at this point that those mindsets don't facilitate healing, and they can actually facilitate disease and illness. So.
Yeah, and I agree. And I want to get a little bit deeper into that. A lot of people listening to the show know that I was originally going to call my book Love, Loss, Lyme. And alliteration notwithstanding, I changed loss to hope. And one of the reasons is because when I started talking to so many people, they've lost livelihoods, relationships, friends who didn't believe them and, moved on, just whatever, just tons and tons of loss. So I changed the word to hope. And actually, Melinda, hope is a very important word for people of the Jewish faith, obviously, in many, many ways. I want to delve a little bit deeper, though. Despair, loss, limitation, they can be sacred teachers that reveal resilience, compassion, and service. I'm going to talk a little bit about the alchemy of suffering. I call the people who I write the book for Lyme survivors, right? I originally toyed with calling them Lyme sufferers and Lyme patients and whatever it might be, but I decided to go with survivors. And I've seen people in various places of social media have latched on to that as well. So talk, Rabbi Melinda, a little bit about that angle and how that, and Gregg, started to touch on it, reminds me of the Churchill quote, if you're going through hell, keep going, right? You have no other option. Melinda.
Right.
Well, since I'm the only woman on the call who's birthed a couple of children, I can tell you that birth is the answer to, or rebirth is the answer to your question on the suffering and bringing it into alchemy. Because here we are in a moment where we're completely constricted. And this is the key to Kabbalah, which is the mystical side of Judaism. We're in constriction, so much so that the only place we can go is out and up into a better awareness, right? So that's, you have to understand that when you're in that constriction, and man, was Lyme constricting for me and I put my doctors through the ringer of questions and consistently searching for the reals of what they were trying to teach me. And they were good teachers and I was a good student. So I think I was fortunate in a sense that I was incredibly constricted and I knew that the only way out was to get intellectual answers and then to turn that into some sort of a fuel for my fire to continue to be lit in a way that would illuminate this alchemy that we're all looking for. So it's really about embracing the constriction, knowing it's there for a reason and for a teaching. It can't go on forever. Some things are just meant to be. Our karma is presenting itself. The people that we've lost or the people that couldn't keep up with us or the doctors that didn't light our fire, they were not meant to be in our path. So you're either going to forge through it or you're going to cycle through and I don't like to say the garbage, but I could use worse words. You got to cycle through, you got to move through what doesn't belong. And then whatever belongs that's left is there. And sometimes it's just me standing there. Me and my good friend Fred from the Love, Hope, and Lyme, which I said should be faith, love, hope. Remember, we talked about that on your last show. That's really that you got to put your faith in some baskets when your basket is empty and other people are filling the basket with the medicine that doesn't belong there. So it's a grounding, intuitive experience that a lot of people don't have. I mean, I can help them with that, but you got to want the help.
Yeah, one thing you just touched on too, and Greg, I'm interested in your thoughts to what Melinda just said, but it's everyone who's going through Lyme, and I've spoken to thousands of people, are going through their own journey. And a lot of it is based on, where they're coming from and when they got bit and the co-infections and so many odd things being thrown in there in genealogy and other aspects like their mold and heavy metal and all these kinds of things. And then their family situation. Uh, and it is a unique and singular journey through that may lead you, and I've spoken to so many people who've come through it to a state of remission, which we're going to talk about later on, a place that they didn't expect to go. We use the example all the time of broken ankles. If you break your ankle, you're going to get an x-ray, you're going to be in a cast for 6 weeks, you're going to go through some recovery from rehab, and then you're going to be back to normal. Lyme, the reason why we're doing the show is it takes you in so many different places. Greg.
Yeah. Well, I don't even know where to start. I really, Melinda, I love your discussing about the constriction, and this is something that Lyme does, but it also that people do to themselves, where they get so focused on symptoms, they get so focused on physical treatments that they don't realize that, like we said earlier, you're not really in control of a lot of this. So letting go, which is the last thing you think of doing, is kind of the gateway to the contracting, or whatever the opposite of constricting is, contracting, opening up. And that's how I found taking focus off of symptoms and gravitating towards the things in my life that I enjoy, that opened my heart, that opened my mind, that opened my energy. These are the things where I started feeling better. Just laughing. I talk about it in my second book, where in the depths of Lyme symptoms and feeling really awful, my wife and I saw a comedian on a DVD, and we, for the entire hour, we were laughing at. And as I was putting this DVD in the case, I said, "Wow, I laughed so hard I forgot I was sick." And then, about an hour later, I'm like, "Wait a minute, that really did happen. I did not feel sick for that hour. So what was that?" I took all of my focus off of how I was feeling, and I went to this other place of a high vibration. And just through a chain reaction of coincidences, after I got better years later, the comedian's name is Jim Brewer. I was interviewed on his show. He's a podcast, and I've become, I'm not friends with him or anything, but acquaintances. And so this is just how life is. Life can be that way if you just open up and let it happen, and if you don't constrict. So I love the terminology, Melinda, and I wholeheartedly agree.
Yeah, that's great. It would be nice if you could listen to that DVD 7x24, right?
Yeah,
People are thinking,
right.
could I be in a constant state of humor?
Yeah.
Well, and I'm kind of interesting. So again, today's Love Hope Lyme podcast with Gregg Kirk. His new book is Your Love Will Make the Difference, a memoir of spiritual adventures through healing. And I'm Melinda Bernstein. And Melinda, you have your meditations on healing on Insight Time. And people who are listening, 95% of the audience of the show is chronic Lyme survivors who are in the midst of trying to figure out, how do I stay better, continue staying better. I'm kind of curious on your thoughts on, for lack of a better word, the integration of science and spirit. It would be nice if something could heal us, but usually there's some degree of medicine or some degree of herbs, which Greg, you're of course an expert on. Talk about, Melinda, how understanding immune and nervous system dysregulation mirrors humanity's larger disconnection from balance. Kind of a heavy question there.
I just think of my mother when you said that. I was caregiving, and Greg, I'm sorry for your loss about your mother. But I was caregiving my mother for 9 years while I had Lyme, and my father was a policeman as I was growing up, so my mother was always constricted and always worried. Worry, 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 worry. Well, why did I go down the path of being a yoga teacher and learning about energy and adapting to What is science here, as an example? Oh, as soon as my mother had to move out of where I'm living, and this was her place with my father for 40 years. So it just goes to show you that I do have a loving family and a loving mother who shows her love in a way that constricts. So I bought this right after she left. This is a picture of the vagal nerve that I got on Amazon. And I thought to myself, this is my first priority. My first priority to myself was to get back my vagal tone. Because if I had that one piece, then everything else that I was trying to integrate into my hopes for my life, my plans, my desires, my dreams, all the things that kept me alive for years, they would fall into place because I would be in a place to receive that information. So, Gregg, when you were saying something about constriction, the other side of that is expansion. And we're waiting for the expansion once the constriction doesn't have a grip. And so once the grip was gone, which was basically my mother's need to control the narrative of where my life was going, subliminally, okay, not like she was saying, do this, because that's not the kind of mother she is. But, you have that vibe, right? So our vibes were very different. And so I got my vibe back. And once I got my vibe back, all of the answers came more easily. I mean, I'd studied herbs. I was on herbs. I was on hormones. I was doing so many things differently, talking to people and not talking to people, trauma therapy, evolving, expunging, emoting, anything that I could do, I could not do in her presence, I was able to do. And that's how the meditation started. I started to realize, oh, let me just go give my people, whoever needs an answer for this question, whether it's grief, whether it's family, whether it's religious divide, whether it's getting back to your juicy self, whether you just want to feel whole within yourself. I went in my father's closet. So this is kind of cute because I'm in my father's closet and I'm recording now these insightful ideas to help people, because people loved my voice all along. That was my, that was my secret. That's my secret. It's a calming voice, and if you have good information along with that, with some subtle, nice music, then people can choose, oh, I'd like to experience this today. They don't have to pay me to coach them. You just go and listen for 10 minutes. You got Melinda's wisdom, and then you go about your day.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Great. What are some of your thoughts?
Well, let's talk about frequencies. So Melinda was talking about, so the marriage of science and woo-woo, or whatever you want to call spiritualism, is frequencies. So I do energy healing. I use tuning forks that have particular frequencies that come out of them. They vibrate. They have feet on the bottom. They go down into your subtle energies and your tissues. I also write music, and I've started writing music and recording it at 432 hertz instead of the standard 440 hertz, which is what is considered concert tuning, and it has a different effect on the body. So I'm very well aware how just, how somebody's vibrating, their moods, can repel you or attract you. And how it's up to us to maintain as best we can. That this is what I started to understand. Lyme disease. If I was around certain people, or at one point I worked a corporate job where I just came home exhausted every day, and I realized, okay, I'm energy leaking. I'm leaking energy. So what do I do about that? So it wasn't a physical thing at all. I understood it was an energetic thing. So a friend of mine who was trained in Kriya Yoga taught me some yoga poses. I developed a meditation that helped me retain and restore my energy and build it up. And then, so that's that's where I'm at with the marriage of science and spirituality.
So you just hit on a couple things. Let's spend, before I ask we have time for one or two more questions again with Gregg Kirk and Melinda Bernstein. Um, let's talk about a couple of spiritual practices that our listeners who are going through chronic Lyme disease and another tick-borne disease may do. And Gregg, you just kind of touched on yoga and some other places. And Melinda, you mentioned yoga throughout the course of today's show a couple of times. Why don't you both kind of, give up a couple of two or three spiritual practices that can help people reconnect with meaning and vitality as they go through their ongoing illness. Gregg, you touched on a couple of them, so we'll let Melinda go first with some of her suggestions, and then you'll bring us yours, and then we have time for one or two more questions before your final thoughts.
Okay.
Melinda, why don't you go first?
It's funny, now I listen to my Sacred Vitality series on Insight Timer to myself. But what I do if I didn't have that, it's very simple. It's the frequency of the earth beneath your feet, the sky above your head. And this is like a Qigong move, but we can just raise it up and inhale and receive it from the sky and bring it down. And let it flow and flush the body out of whatever it's holding and let it go back into the earth. You can go outside and do that. That's a very beautiful practice to get your feet in the earth and you feel the breeze and you see the birds sing and you watch I'm like that naturally. I can't help it. It's just one of those ways of being, but you have to start somewhere. And if you're in the thick of it with Lyme, which I did try to help one woman do this and she loved it. She practiced this. Just so simple. Then there's all the directions that you can take your hands in and move your arms around. And embodiment is very important. If you're sitting around with Lyme, then it's stuck. You got to do some kind of movement, even if it's awkward at first. So that would be my number one way of suggesting people get connected. Yeah.
Oh, Fred, you're on mute, but I'm going to.
I am. Yeah. Give us a suggestion as well.
Yeah. So, like I mentioned, so you can go to my website, which is spelled Gregg Kirk, GreggKirk.com. Go to the blog section. I wrote a whole blog about Kriya yoga poses. I've created a practice that I do every day for 20 minutes to half an hour. So these are movements that you do in a meditative state, and they're very simple arm movements where you hold your hands a certain way and it moves energy. It just like Melinda was doing, arm movements done in a way where your heart's open and your energy is peaceful. It has an effect. And then there's a meditation on there called the God Spark meditation that came to me through something else that I would like to invite your listeners, if you like, every Sunday afternoon at 2 p.m. I do a online group healing circle where it's a guided meditation. So that's another thing that I've noticed whenever, like for the past 2 weeks, because my mother was about ready to pass, I haven't been doing that. And I feel a difference. So being able to participate and lead these things are a big deal. And then just one final thing. Years ago, I was invited by my friend who taught me the yoga poses to watch a Buddhist monk who came from Nepal named Chogyal Rinpoche. And he said, he's going to teach us how to chant. And I thought, I'm not really interested in this. Well, it was one of the best things I've ever participated in. This guy came, and as most of these Buddhist monks are, he was in his 30s, and he was actually really funny, and that's, the good vibe that they project. But he taught us how to chant. It's really almost like a singing. And so whenever, something happens in my life where I really need to be cleared, and these other things that I do are more or less maintenance, you can look it up on YouTube. It's called Chogyal. It's Chogyal Rinpoche, Rinpoche, and the meditation is called the Green Mantra. One of the best things that you can ever do. It's a 15 minutes. Sing or chant to it, and it will clear anything out of you that doesn't belong.
Very good. Gregg, I have one final question for you, but Melinda, I one question. So uh, there's a famous meme where someone says, "Oh, you have chronic Lyme? Then do yoga." And not everybody's into yoga. People see it, they don't embrace it. Um, why would yoga be helpful for people who have chronic Lyme disease?
Are you asking me first? Yeah.
No, I'm just asking. I'm asking Melinda specifically. Then I have a question for you.
Sorry.
That's
Okay.
okay. That's okay.
Yoga is an energy practice that moves the frequency, or we call it the nadis, okay, in Kundalini. It moves the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system into balance. So it's all about balance. You're usually lopsided with one thing. If you're right-handed, it's, if you're more on the feminine, it's going to be on this side. There's all kinds of reasons for it, but and yoga doesn't necessarily always mean moving the body. It can also be acts of service. It could be chanting. It could be, chanting opens up the throat. So then you have more voice to express, and that moves the energy of the thyroid, and things of that nature get into harmony. That's the word, harmony and balance. That's the reason why yoga would be very good for Lyme people. I use Yo Chi. She's a girl, Marissa, I can't think of her last name, but she combines yoga and Qigong, and she has these 15-minute bite-sized YouTube videos. I've always thought I would become a teacher of her stuff, but I've got so many other passions and interests that I don't have time. But Yochi combines them both, and so people can get a little taste of that if you don't like yoga.
Very good. Gregg, before I ask you both for your final thoughts, I'm just kind of curious on something. Lyme remission, right? You see a lot on social media. Can you be cured from chronic Lyme? And we don't need to debate that right now, but is there such a thing as Lyme remission? And if so, how can you achieve it? And what should you be doing to stay there?
Yeah, well, there is Lyme remission. I'm experiencing it now as we speak, and I'll tell you that I fell out of it when I thought, oh, I've crossed the finish line into remission, and now I can eat pizza and drink beer again. Again, going back to the thing that Lyme disease is information and an indicator for you to go a certain way in your life. If you try to go back, you'll fall out of remission. So why not keep going through hell and out of it, as you said, Fred, and go into a better lifestyle where you're eating better, you're having better experiences, you're maybe investigating spirituality, you're at least laughing and listening to good music, that kind of stuff. That will keep you in a state of remission.
Very good. All right. So today we had Melinda Bernstein and Gregg Kirk. We talked about spiritual aspects of chronic Lyme disease. I want to thank you both for being here. Encourage anyone who's listening or watching this on YouTube to reach out to both of them. They're on all the various social media platforms. And I just want to acknowledge you both for what you're doing and for the messages that you're bringing and for the help that you both have given to so many people. I'm glad that I've had you on the podcast, the Love Hope Lyme podcast, multiple times. Gregg, you and I have done book signings in person together. And, we both actually have a Live Aid experience, that you post every year on the anniversary of Live Aid. So that's always fun. Some of that, we both were in Philly at the same time. And Melinda, I appreciate you for everything you're doing. Give us something brief to kind of close today's show on. Gregg, why don't you go first? Give us a final thought, something that you want to impart with the listeners and watchers today.
Yeah, there's more to us than our experiences, our bodies, our thoughts, our beliefs. There's more to us. That's all that I'm being compelled to tell people lately. So there's more to you than Lyme disease. There's more to you even than your schooling, what your parents taught you. There's more to you. You have so much potential as a human being to go well beyond whatever you've been taught or even what you believe at this moment. And I think it's my compulsion to push the limits of that for myself and to help other people understand that.
Very powerful. Melinda, why don't you bring us home?
You can tell yourself any story you want, but if you tell yourself the story that there are miracles happening every day, then you will find them.
Yeah, that is strong. The Einstein quote, you could view everything as a miracle or nothing as a miracle. And one of my favorite quotes before this was a Henry Ford quote, if you think you can or think you can't, you're right.
Right.
So again, I want to acknowledge you both for being on the show. Again, my name is Fred Diamond. This is the Love, Hope, Lyme podcast.